Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hey everyone, my name's Oliver and I'm a former addict in recovery. Welcome to the Recovery Cast, proudly brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from addiction for people in recovery from addiction. There are many definitions of addiction, but we keep it simple. Addiction to us is when people use alcohol, drugs, or certain behaviours repetitively to their detriment, basically when it's a problem for them and their families. Therefore, an addict is not necessarily someone using a needle in a dark laneway, and an alcoholic is not necessarily a homeless man in a park. Recovery, for us, means using an active daily process or program to deal with alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, or other behavioural addictions. People in recovery are committed to complete abstinence. This daily process is as important as to being able to live normal lives as daily dialysis is for people with kidney problems. The podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. Now, I myself am a recovering drug addict. However, each day we will focus on a different perspective of recovery. Everyone who participates in this podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology and will focus on a variety of different types of recovery, including 12-step recovery programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and other programs like Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and recovery, so we suggest it only as one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, please go to www.rehab.melbourne. We have a really interesting episode planned for you. We have one of my favourite readings from the Narcotics Anonymous Just for Today reading book. And today's reading is November 8, and it's called Freed from Insanity. Do I believe it would be insane to walk up to someone and say, "May I please have a heart attack or a fatal accident?" Basic text, page 24. We've heard it said that unless we're in love, we can't remember what love feels like. The same could be said of insanity. Once we're freed of it, we may forget how truly bizarre our insane thinking can be. But to be grateful for the degree of sanity to which we've been restored in Narcotics Anonymous, we need to remember just how truly insane we've been. Today, it may be hard to imagine saying something as ridiculous as, "May I please have a heart attack or a fatal accident?" No one in their right mind is going to ask for such things. And that's the point. In our active addiction, we were not in our right mind. Each day we practiced our addiction, we courted fatal disease, degradation, exploitation, impoverishment, imprisonment, death by violence, even death by sheer stupidity. In that context, the idea of asking for a heart attack or a fatal accident doesn't sound all that far out. That's how insane we've been. The program, the fellowship, and our higher power, together they've worked a miracle. The second step is not a vain hope, it is reality. Knowing the degree of the insanity we've experienced, we can appreciate all the more the miraculous power that has restored us thus far to sanity. For that we are truly grateful. Just for today, I will take some time to recall how insane I've been while practicing my addiction. Then I will thank my higher power for the sanity that's been restored to my life. It's a funny reading. I always remember this. There's 365 readings in this book, and every year this rolls around, I just have a bit of a laugh to myself because it's sort of a really ridiculous thing to say, well, may I please have a heart attack or a fatal accident? But as the reading says, there was a time in my life when I was practicing in active addiction that it wasn't such a ridiculous sort of statement to make because I really was courting disaster every day when I was just playing like Russian roulette with my health, with my life, my career, with everything. I was really running the risk of doing myself and other people serious harm. And, I was at risk of becoming homeless, risk of having an accident or violence, the situations I put myself into, and the sheer stupidity. I mean, getting behind the wheel of a car under the influence, being blacked out in really like dangerous places and situations. I can give you a lot of examples of being overseas and trying to find drugs and things like that. All those things, and ending up in really scary situations with some scary characters, shady people. I put myself at risk a lot, and that there was no choice behind that. I was desperately seeking, and trying to further my behavior. I was trying to get drugs. I was trying to keep using, and I would go to any lengths to do that. Today, it's a very different story, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I was looking up the definition of insanity because I wanted to get a little bit of sort of background for this episode of what insanity is that they're talking about. And Psychology Today, which is a website, said the definition is basically people can't discriminate between fantasy and reality. They can't conduct their affairs due to psychosis or just an inability to do so, and they're struggling with uncontrollable impulsive behavior. And I just thought to myself, yeah, I ticked all those boxes for sure. And I think anybody who's been through addiction can probably, identify with those things. Examples of insanity that I can think of is getting into a fight in a car park over a parking space with a complete stranger, and having the police in attendance over a car park. How insane is that? To get so worked up. I mean, it was that for me is just a great example of all three of those things. I mean, that I didn't really have a great grip on reality. I couldn't conduct my affairs. I couldn't go to the supermarket and get groceries without, having the police in attendance, and uncontrollable impulsive behavior sounds about right to me. So, like that, road rage, anything like that, anything where I don't get my way, anything. When I was in active addiction, I had to have everything my way, and I needed everything now. And the reason for that was just because I needed to use, and it wasn't an option to not use. It was a really scary time in hindsight for me because I just wanted to further my own needs and my own narratives, and I would do anything to get what I wanted. An example of not being able to conduct my affairs would be that, I couldn't pay bills, I couldn't support myself financially, I had to lean on my family for money, in my mid-20s, which is really quite sad, and that's where my addiction took me. I couldn't work properly, and when I was working, I wasn't doing a very good job. I was constantly in trouble at work. Couldn't meet social commitments, lost friendships. There were, birthday parties and family functions that I missed, and all relationships that I was in at that point with people. The drugs came first at all times. And when I was in a new relationship, I would try and hide the extent of my addiction, but it would very quickly come to the surface that I was out of control, and then when the other person said, well, you're out of control, I would then just push them away until they left me, because all I wanted to do was just use. And that's that uncontrollable impulsive behavior of stealing from friends and family to get money. I could go on about all of these bad things. There's so many things that happened during my active addiction that were just a really great definition of insanity. But what I want to talk about now is actually what my life is like today, thanks to my recovery and the recovery program that I work on a daily basis, and how much choice I have, freedom to choose, and how I'm firmly rooted in reality today, and that I'm able to contribute to society. There's very little impulsive behavior. The impulsive behavior that troubles me today is that I spend $400 on Christmas shopping for my friends and family, and then, struggle to pay the bills because I've been doing something generous for other people. That's my impulsive behavior today. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Rangers Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.
We're talking about how I've been freed from insanity and what that's actually like, and how I was freed from insanity. We've got to remember that there are people out there listening that are like, okay, Oliver, how did you do it? So we'll talk about that now. We'll talk about today, my thoughts and my actions are all firmly rooted in reality and in the present. So it's basically, I've been freed from that insanity. I really remember how insane my thoughts and my actions were. I think today everything's a lot safer and a lot genuinely happier and more free. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is not how I'm going to get drugs that day or who I'm going to go and see so I can get drugs, something like that. That was what my thoughts used to be like. Today, I wake up and I think about all the awesome stuff I'm going to do, and I think about what sort of, like, whether I have to work or whether I have to go and visit my family or things like that. It's just generally, I'm actually contributing to society and doing the right thing today. And I have the freedom to choose what I do. So I have hobbies and I have routine and structure and all of these things that I've built in my recovery. And, we're going to talk about how I actually got to that point. Well, honestly, the first step for me was to go into treatment. I couldn't get clean on my own. I couldn't make that step into recovery on my own. And, that's where treatment facilities such as Hills and Rangers Private come in. That's their job, they took me, I didn't go to Hills and Rangers Private, but I went somewhere much like Hills and Rangers Private, just a private treatment facility, and I was taken away from triggers, and I started to learn how to go about getting into recovery in that nice, safe space. And I learnt some tools and some skills, and after 21 days for me, I was let back out into the world. And what I did was I went straight to a meeting. And that was very much the story for me. I continued to learn how to live and how to stay in recovery and how to free myself from insanity. The important thing to remember is that just because I got clean, it wasn't like a magical light switch that was switched on and I magically became sane just because I wasn't using drugs anymore. That was very much not the case. It was a long process of getting into recovery and breaking down those habits that I'd reinforced over years and years, and that's what Hills and Rangers Private starts to help the guests do during their stay. They start to look at behaviours and they start to look at what to do, how to live without drugs, how to live without these addictive behaviours. For me, I had to learn that very much in Narcotics Anonymous, and anything that any records of my early recovery, whether it's videos or things like that, I noticed that even though I was clean, I was actually still quite insane. And over the weeks and months and years since, I have done the 12 steps and taken responsibility for my actions and learned to see things for what they really are. And I think that's where it's really important, is that I've broken down my sort of character defects of seeking to control things in order to make myself feel safe. And I've learned to see that, well, all my behaviours actually play a part in my life. And if I'm going to behave a certain way, there's going to be certain outcomes. So I learned to see things for what they really are and realise that, well, I need to behave in a way that is honest and productive, and just something that's not going to, behave in a way that's not going to make my life harder for myself, basically. That's honestly it, is that when I was in active addiction, I was just going around making things difficult for myself. And no wonder I wanted to sort of anaesthetize those feelings, because I knew deep down that I was making things worse for myself. It says we can't remember how insane we were. Part of me does, I do remember those delusional thoughts and actions and things, and I'm just really glad that I'm on the other side of that, and that I can behave in a way that furthers my life and makes me just a contributing member of society, and everything just goes so smoothly now. I used to remember seeing other people in their lives doing the right thing and things were going really well for them. It was friends who were, they were completing their degrees and they were getting good jobs and they were in healthy relationships and they had, that nice car and they were able to pay their rent. They had money so they could pay bills and things like that. And I thought, oh, I wish I was them, And now I am one of those people where I can do all those things and experience things that are just amazing. How I did it, I just became willing, and I was willing to do what it took. I was willing to go on that journey of recovery, no matter how difficult it was, because it was actually less difficult than another day of that crazy addiction, I had to look at things that weren't always pleasant. I had to look at my behaviours and be really actually confronted by the way I was behaving, to say, well, the way I was behaving wasn't okay, and the reason I was doing it was because I needed to be in control all the time, and if I wasn't in control, then I would act out and get angry and violent and avoid things like that. And now I have actually the courage to face things that I don't like and deal with them appropriately, rather than fleeing from responsibility. I can be a responsible adult. That's where it all comes from. And if you're in that first stage of early recovery, or maybe you're even thinking about getting into that first stage and you're not there yet, I can say, from my perspective, it's absolutely worth it. And it may not be easy, but it's certainly easier than continuing that path that I was on, where it was just disaster waiting to happen. I'm really glad that I did it when I did, and I didn't prolong that insanity any longer. I just gave it a go, and because I was really willing and open and to doing whatever it took, I think that was the recipe for success, was that I was truly ready. So, look, if you're thinking about making that step, then I really suggest you visit www.rehab.melbourne. That was that first step for me, was where I reached out for help, and the rest does fall into place in its own time, I think. Just make that step today and start that journey. We'll hear more about that journey that I took and how it's possible for everyone over the next few episodes. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy springtime in Melbourne. Can't wait to share some more stuff on some more episodes of the Recovery Cast. Have Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.